In this video, we'll be taking a look at 3 NFL games happening on December 21st, 2025, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 6 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released, so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 3 NFL games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start: if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Atlanta Falcons versus Arizona Cardinals. Arizona stumbles into this one having dropped 11 of its last 12 games, and that kind of slide tells you plenty before you even look at the matchup. They are back home against Atlanta on Sunday afternoon in Week 16, but home field only does so much when the roster feels worn down and the motivation looks thin. At this point in the season, it is hard to make a serious case that the Cardinals suddenly flip a switch, so it makes sense to look toward the roadside if you are picking a winner against the spread. The defense is the clearest red flag. Arizona has just given up 45 and 40 points in back-to-back games and has allowed 40 or more points 4 times during its current 6-game losing streak. That is not a random blip. It is a pattern of a unit that cannot get stops, especially when the game starts to tilt. When a defense leaks like that, even average offenses look comfortable, and a team that is already short on confidence tends to fold earlier in games. Atlanta is in a very different emotional space. The Falcons have been out of the playoff picture for a while, but they are still playing like a group that wants to put good tape out there. They have won 2 straight, including an impressive comeback on the road in Week 15, when they trailed the division-leading Buccaneers by 2 touchdowns in the 4th quarter and still found a way to win. That kind of rally can give a locker room a real boost, and it matters that it came in primetime on Thursday night. With that schedule, they come into this one on a mini-bye with extra rest and extra time to prepare. Capping games late in the year between 2 non-contending teams is always tricky. Effort can swing wildly, and sometimes you get a surprise from the side that looks dead on paper. Here, though, the recent evidence keeps pointing in the same direction. Last week, Atlanta was catching a short number in Tampa and still walked out with an upset, which shows they have not mailed it in. The Falcons are still playing hard, and their quarterback is coming off one of his better outings of the season, which gives you at least a baseline level of trust in the offense. On the other side, the Cardinals have managed just 1 win since Week 3 and are 1-5 against the spread in their last 6 games. That is a mix of losing outright and not covering, which is a rough combination for backers. The injury situation does not help either. Every week, the report fills up with receivers, the quarterback, tackles, running backs. It reads like a roll call of key contributors. When a team is this banged up and already struggling, it becomes tough to expect clean execution. To be fair, there is one caution light for Atlanta backers. The Falcons have lost 4 straight games as a favorite, so you do not want to treat this as some automatic free space. Still, when you weigh the current form, the relative health, and the visible competitive spirit, it is easier to trust the team that is stringing together wins and comebacks instead of the one leaking points and bodies. This sets up as a strong situation for a suddenly confident Falcons group against a Cardinals side that looks like one of the worst teams in the league right now. That is why laying a small number with Atlanta makes sense. As our first pick for this matchup, the Atlanta Falcons to win and cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. When 2 teams reach this point in the season with just 8 combined wins, the matchup usually does not scream must-watch, but ugly records do not always mean ugly scoring. Sometimes you get exactly the kind of loose, big play-friendly game that totals bettors quietly love. Here, both offenses have a real chance to create those moments because both defenses are among the softer units in the league. Arizona's defense, in particular, has been extremely porous. The Cardinals are giving up 27.7 points per game and 5.8 yards per play, and those season-long numbers actually flatter what has been happening lately. During their 6-game losing streak, they have given up at least 40 points 4 separate times, which is the kind of trend that makes every offensive skill player on the other sideline smile. For Atlanta, that is a pretty appealing setup. Bijan Robinson gets to work against a defense that struggles to tackle consistently and gives up space at all 3 levels. The Falcons' passing game also gets a boost from the expected return of Drake London, which gives them another legitimate threat on the outside. With that kind of matchup, it is easy to picture chunk plays, explosive runs that slip through arm tackles, and deep shots when Arizona's coverage busts in the back end. and it is not as if Atlanta is locking anyone down on the other side. The Falcons allow slightly more than 24.4 points per game, so they are not exactly slamming the door. Arizona has enough to take advantage, especially with Jacoby Brissett guiding the offense. In every game he has started, the Cardinals have scored at least 17 points, which is not electric, but it is steady and keeps them from completely disappearing on the scoreboard. That kind of baseline production matters when you are trying to project whether a total can get pushed over because you are not relying on a complete outlier performance to get there. Add it all up and you get a recipe that very easily turns into a shootout-style script. Two bad defenses, one that is getting torched weekly and one that is quietly average at best, and two offenses that can hit enough plays to stay involved, with the Cardinals likely giving up field position and points again, and the Falcons far from airtight. Both teams should find their way into the end zone often enough. That is how a late-season game between struggling teams can still end up with plenty of scoring and a total that trends higher rather than lower. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Pittsburgh Steelers versus Detroit Lions. Detroit comes into this one trying to keep a quirky pattern alive. They have been alternating wins and losses since Week 5, and they are fresh off a 41-34 loss to the Rams. That defeat is hardly embarrassing. Their last 3 losses have all come by a single score against Los Angeles, Green Bay, and Philadelphia, 3 of the strongest teams in the National Football Conference. So the recent setbacks say more about the quality of the opposition than any collapse from Detroit. The quarterback play has backed that up. Jared Goff has gone over 300 passing yards in 2 straight games and has thrown 6 touchdown passes with no interceptions across his last 3 outings. When your quarterback is that sharp, it usually gives you a solid floor, especially at home. Yes, the original text called him Goff, but the performance clearly fits Goff. This week he gets a Pittsburgh defense that might not be at full strength. Star pass rusher T.J. Watt is expected to be out with a lung issue, and that alone changes how comfortable any quarterback can feel in the pocket. On top of that, defensive tackle Keanu Benton and corner James Pierre are both questionable. If even one of those bodies is missing, that is fewer problems to worry about in protection and in the intermediate passing game. The picture is not much cleaner for Pittsburgh on offense. 3 offensive linemen, Andrews Pete, Isaac Seumalo, and Zach Frazier, are all listed as questionable. That is a lot of uncertainty up front. At 42 years old, Aaron Rodgers is not exactly the same player he was earlier in his career, and that is before you start talking about protection issues. If the line in front of him is banged up, asking him to stand in and run a clean offense becomes even trickier. Detroit sits just outside the National Football Conference playoff picture and has very little margin for error. They simply cannot afford more slip-ups if they want to stay in the mix, and that sense of urgency often shows up in how a team approaches a home game like this. Pittsburgh, by contrast, has won 2 in a row and holds a 1-game edge in the American Football Conference North, but they walk into a tough environment against an offense that has been putting up big numbers. The Steelers have scored at least 27 points in 4 of their last 5 games, which is solid, but they are now dealing with a Detroit attack that has put up at least 34 points in 3 of its last 4 and tends to crank things up at home. The injuries for Detroit are a concern, sure, but the overall talent level and recent performance still tilt toward the Lions. When you weigh the quarterback play, the banged-up Steelers line, and the fact that Detroit has gone toe-to-toe with top National Football Conference teams and kept those games within 1 score, it is reasonable to see them as the stronger side. On a neutral field, thinking of the Lions as roughly a touchdown better than the Steelers does not feel like a stretch. Playing this one in Detroit only reinforces that edge. As our first pick for this matchup, the Lions have shown again and again that they are very comfortable in games where points flow. Goff is throwing the ball with confidence, and he has genuine playmakers around him. Amon-Ra St. Brown works as a volume monster in the passing game, while Jahmyr Gibbs threatens both as a runner and receiver. That combination creates a lot of stress on defenses, especially ones that are missing pieces up front. Detroit has put up at least 34 points in 3 of its last 4 games, which is not a fluke pattern. At least one pass catcher has topped 100 receiving yards in 5 of the last 6 outings. St. Brown just racked up 164 yards in that 41-34 loss to the Rams, and that was on the road against a tougher defense than what they see here. So even if this game does not turn into the full-on shootout that Los Angeles game became, it does not need to. Something slightly more modest can still clear a typical mid-range total comfortably. On the other side, the Steelers do not need to be spectacular, just competent. If they can chip in around 20 points, that would likely be enough to push things where an over-bettor would want it. Rodgers may be past his absolute peak, but when he is healthy, as the write-up notes, he remains more than capable of running an efficient passing attack. He has averaged 254 passing yards across his last 2 games, with 3 touchdown passes and no interceptions in that span. That kind of calm, turnover-free production is exactly what you want from the other offense in a potential high-scoring game. The matchup he gets is not exactly intimidating. Detroit's defense ranks 24th against the pass and 27th in yards per pass attempt allowed. That is the profile of a secondary that can be beaten vertically and horizontally, especially by a veteran quarterback who knows how to pick his spots. If Rodgers gets even decent protection from that questionable line, he should be able to find enough windows to keep drives alive and put points on the board. The trends line up with that story too. The over is 4-0 in the Lions' last 4 games and 6-1 in their last 7. For the Steelers, the over has cashed in 3 of their last 4 road games. Those repeated results support the idea that both teams are involved in matchups where the scoring spreads around and totals creep higher. When you put it all together, it is not hard to imagine Detroit pushing past the 30-point mark again while Pittsburgh adds its share against a defense that has struggled. These Steelers are not the old, suffocating version that used to grind games into the teens. On the road against a potent Detroit passing attack, they are more vulnerable to explosive plays. With the Lions already proving they can hang big numbers on better defenses and the Steelers reasonably positioned to contribute, the setup leans strongly toward another game with plenty of points. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Las Vegas Raiders versus Houston Texans. Houston rolls into Sunday riding a 6-game winning streak, and they will try to stretch it to 7 when they welcome the Las Vegas Raiders in the afternoon slot. Not long ago they were sitting at 3-5, and now they look like one of the best teams in the league, mostly because the defense has turned into a nightmare for opponents. Las Vegas, meanwhile, is stuck near the bottom of the pile and playing like it. The Texans' defensive profile reads like something out of a video game. They are number 1 in total defense, number 1 in scoring defense, number 1 in yards per pass attempt allowed, 3rd against the run, 3rd in takeaways, and 9th in sacks. That is a lot of different ways to ruin an offense's afternoon. For the Raiders, that is a brutal draw. Their attack has looked shaky even against ordinary defenses, so expecting them to suddenly move the ball well here feels optimistic at best. They did not score a single point in their Week 15 loss to Philadelphia, and they have not topped 17 points since Week 9. They also got blanked by Kansas City back in Week 7, which just adds to the pattern. Quarterback Geno Smith is back after missing last week, but that alone does not magically fix anything. His stat line tells the story, with 16 touchdown passes and 14 interceptions this season, which is way too close for comfort. Against a defense this aggressive and this opportunistic, that kind of ratio is asking for trouble. Both teams have injury concerns going into Week 16, but the situations are not equal. The Raiders' offense has been a mess all year, and now they have to deal with one of the league's best defensive units on the road. Houston's defense has piled up 38 sacks, which ranks 8th, along with 73 tackles for loss, tied for 8th, and 24 takeaways, tied for 3rd. That is terrible news for a Las Vegas team that is dead last in rushing yards at 70.8 per game and in yards per carry at 3.4. Their offensive line is staring at a mountain here, and there is not much reason to think it will suddenly dominate in the trenches. With all that in mind, backing the slumping Raiders in this spot would feel like stepping in front of a train just because you like the color of the lights. Houston has the better defense, more momentum, and the matchup edges where it matters most. That is why the expectation is for the Texans not only to win, but to do it by a margin that takes care of the number. As our first pick for this matchup, the Houston Texans to win and cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. A clash between the best defense in football and an offense that ranks dead last in both yards and points almost writes the script for you. It points very plainly toward a low-scoring game. The total is set very low at 38, so this leans more toward a cautious approach than a bold call, but it still lines up as an underplay. Las Vegas' side of the scoring equation hardly needs extra explanation. Their offense has been stuck in the mud for weeks, and they are walking straight into the teeth of a dominant defense. The bigger question is how many points Houston is likely to put up. On talent alone, the answer could be quite a few, especially with C.J. Stroud back under center against a soft Raiders defense. He has the arm and the weapons to take full advantage of short fields and busted coverages. But once Houston builds a comfortable lead, the game script probably changes. At that point, the Texans can shift into clock control mode, lean on the ground game, and ask their defense to squeeze the life out of whatever the Raiders have left. That kind of conservative approach tends to slow everything down, even when one side is clearly superior. There is another wrinkle here. Las Vegas is actually solid against the run, allowing just 3.9 yards per carry. So if Houston spends a good chunk of the second half pounding the ball and chewing time, they might not turn every drive into 7 points. Add in the fact that running back Woody Marks is questionable with an ankle issue, and the chances of Houston posting a huge number get a little thinner. The Texans can still control the game, but they do not necessarily need to keep scoring in bunches once it is in hand. Honestly, it would not be shocking if the Raiders failed to score at all. The matchup is that rough for them. There is always the risk that Houston relaxes after building what feels like an inevitable cushion and gives up a late touchdown or two that only matter to people holding tickets on the number. Even with that possibility, the overall setup still leans toward a final score that stays under a relatively modest total, with Houston's defense doing most of the talking and the clock doing the rest. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.